So how this piece began is that I went to an exhibition in San Diego, California about a year ago, and I went through a museum that focused on Japanese and other Asian traditional modes of expression, and in that I was introduced to the form of a folded book. And I wrote that in a notebook because I wanted to use it later. So that when the show came up with the theme of graffiti, the first thing that I thought of is writing, and immediately, because that form of the folded book was in the back of my mind, I went immediately to that because I wanted to see if I can do something with that. Also, I had an interesting dilemma. Most of my work is very large scale. It's an entire wall that it doesn't break down, so I have a shipping problem. It doesn't move very well because it's usually one large piece, and I really wanted to have a show here. So the assignment for me was to make one large sculpture based on graffiti, one also that would incorporate the issues that I'm concerned with in all of my work, which are narratives of identity, a variety of things, identity construction, how an individual changes in form when attached to a particular group, just anything having to do with identity, cultural patterns, how they affect us, internal patterns, how they affect. So this is where I started with my work. This is fiberglass that's crocheted, so it starts out soft. And also within that, the work is very much about using the language of the material. So in that sense, I am a modernist. I am very much about the formal creation and finding a new form within the language of the material. So as much as it is about the dialogue, the concept, the narrative, that's usually based on, always based on identity, it's as much based on a formal exploration of the material, utilizing its specific material language. So that's where we started. My assignment is to make a large sculpture that breaks down, that's based on graffiti, incorporates my agenda. And immediately, like I said, I went to the folded book because the form fascinated me. And then as for the color, I actually utilized the first 50 digits in the number pi, the infinite number pi, to come up with a seemingly random distribution, but it's very ordered. I love using mathematics in the internal structure of all my work because math is found in all of nature. I love that. I love that mark. That's really nice. Sort of like baby, it's birth. You know how babies have the footprints. Yeah. Very much, I like it. Amazing how much value you can get out of, something, yeah. Anyway, the way I arrived at the pattern distribution and also the color distribution is that it's actually very clinical. I use the first 50 digits in pi, 3.14 or 159 and so on. And so literally, I first came up with colors. There are 4 colors. 3 colors and a neutral, and I wanted them to be all neutral but still have a lot of color in them, so I chose these. This, and where's it? Is it? Yes, this, okay. This panel right here, this is the same stitch as that, but this is worked in a vertical way, and this is worked in a horizontal way. Fiberglass, I crochet it with a regular hook, just like women have crocheted lace for centuries. And so all these started out as the exact same rectangles in sort of a white, opaque fabric. And then the way that they become translucent as hard is that I use a hard finish polyester resin. I start out, it's a liquid resin. I add the color to it. All this color came from dyes added to the resin. Then you add the catalyst or hardener, mix it up and apply it. I apply it gently with a 2-inch brush, and I hang it. Typically, the material is laid into molds, because when the fabric, whether it's the fabric that I crochet or it's the stuff that you buy in the market, they sell a mat, they sell a cloth. Once you get it wet, it's like working with yogurt. It just mush. It gets soaked, it clings to itself, and it just gravity pulls it down and it rips. So typically, the industrial use is that they use molds. They lay it down, but I don't like to do that because it makes it flat. Because I want to retain all of the dimension of the knots so that it has more of a life to it, what I have to do is I have to utilize gravity. And then when it takes about, I actually only have about 20 minutes to work with it. You apply it, it starts sitting, sort of starts gelling, it doesn't stretch anymore, and then it shouldn't be moved. It's another 24 hours before you can move it. Then I flip it, finish it, let it get hard, sand it down. And so what I was saying, sort of my general work, my method of working in one sentence is that I abstract narratives based on identity in the language of crocheted fiberglass. So yeah, what does that mean? I start out with a story, with a verbal story that is defined. I mean, every material, whether it's what Brian's doing with his brush, his brush and ink, and a big fat crayon or a little tiny lead pencil, each will have a different way of expressing the same idea. Its own signature, its own language. I mean, all of just like every sculptural material, oil paint has its own language, lead on paper has its own language. In that sense, the crocheted fiberglass has its own language. It has its own mark, has its own way of stating the same relationship. Like, if he and I are given, I know it's a different medium, but if we're both given a wall, he's given a big wall with a tiny pencil, and if I'm given a small wall with a big fat brush, and you tell us to express these relationships, they're going to be quite different. And that's because each material and process has its own very specific language. And one of my tasks that I try to do is find the greatest specificity, the highest vocabulary I can of this language, and just translate what I'm saying in the words into that language, and that's what I call the abstraction. So although I know where I'm starting, the starting point was a folded book. The starting point were ideas that came from graffiti, about writing, about identity, which was actually a very natural overlay over what I do, which is always identity construction and how one is seen or fits into a group or affected by a group. And that's it. Another thing that's actually what I love about the idea of the folded book is about 2 years ago I started, these things, they're translucent, they're never flat, they have been wall-based. For the large pieces, the material structurally really needs a wall for structure. So they've always been on the wall, they're large, they come out, and there's always a shadow. Up till about 2 years ago, it was just a nice surprise. It was incidental. It was, oh, what a great shadow. About 2 years ago, I began to really I began to incorporate the shadow into the original, into the form from the very beginning, into the idea from the very beginning, which meant, in the smallest acts. The first way I started is I took panels that were maybe 8 feet by 2 feet, and I hung them on the wall, perpendicular to the wall like this, just to see how the light passed through. And so this is actually the first time that I'm trying this sort of 45 degree to 45 degree, this thing, to see what happens. Because when these things are lit, two things happen. Not only multiple things happen. The translucent fiberglass just lights up. It becomes sort of candy colored and it just shimmers, but it has a nice sort of very soft glow. If there's enough of a focus of a light on there, some of the color will transfer in a whisper onto the wall, the stronger colors. I don't know about the gray. The gray probably will disappear into the shadow, but the stronger yellows should cast sort of a yellowish glow on the wall. And also, etching the shadow, and so that if the light passes through the piece right here where it's closer, the shadow will be much more well defined. And when it passes through the piece when it's far away from the wall, it's a lot more out of focus. So it again becomes yet something else. That's what I also like about this piece. It's identity. It's defined, but it sort of travels. It's a hybrid. It's not one thing. It starts out using in-your-face crochet. This is a very craft-based material. I mean, I crochet it. One could call it craft, but it goes beyond that. So is it craft? Is it sculpture? It is about form. It is about movement. It's about containment. It is very much the language of sculpture. At the same time, it's very much about line. So in that sense, it is about drawing. It is about movement. It is about pattern. It incorporates all these different categories of visual language. So it, really, I don't know what you want to call this. It's not. Is it just fiber art, sculpture? Is it craft? It's actually a hybrid of all these things. And I think that's so naturally the material speaks about identity. And so then the shadow on top of it is yet another wonderful thing that articulates identity. It's like, what is it? Okay, is the fiberglass the tool that creates the shadow? So if the shadow is the end product, is this just a tool and I'm doing a drawing on the wall? Again, identity, what is it? Should I stop? Because I can keep going.